Louder.
All right, we are recording.
Good. All right. I will call the meeting to order. It's just about 3 o'clock. We've only got 1 minute early, but I don't think anyone will criticize us for that. The agenda. Does anyone have any questions or corrections or suggestions of how we should proceed with the agenda? Do you like it?
Yes.
See one approval? Commissioner Hawkins? I see 2 approvals. I think we've got an agenda. I will consider without opposition the agenda is approved. As to the approval of the minutes of the last meeting, I went over the minutes and I sent my corrections directly to Holly so we don't have to spend time here going through them, including the item where Commissioner Folks is quoted as talking about Sergeant Jordan's work on the drafting policy. That will now be draft policy. So I think we're good to go. Do you have any corrections to the minutes?
Move to approve the minutes with the edits suggested by Chair Rady.
Second.
Motion is made, seconded. No discussion is necessary. Any objection to the motion? Seeing none, it's passed unanimously. We will go ahead and review the work of the subcommittee that will be submitted to the commission as a whole to submit to the city council manager and so forth as our yearly report. I wrote it up. I hope everyone's had a chance to read it. It's just 1 page. Are there any corrections, changes, suggestions we toss the whole thing and rewrite it? Anything?
I did have a quick question. It's really semantic, so please tell me to move along if I need to move along. The initial 2-year approval, Jensina, was it initial 6-year and you worked and allocated
6 months.
Sorry, 6 months. Jensina, was it initially 6 months and then you allotted to and moved to have it for the full 2 years? Does that even matter?
It was originally for 6 months because that's the standard term that a subcommittee with the City of Eugene boards and commissions is limited to. And so I approached the city council for an extension for the 2-year extension, and it was unanimously granted.
Beautiful. Do we need to put that in writing? Does that matter?
It's in the first sentence. 2 years ago, the Eugene City Council authorized the police commission to establish a law enforcement mental health and wellness subcommittee for 2 years, which was the final outcome of what they did. They said 6 months. Okay, we'll make it 2 years. I think that'll stand, but we can change it if you want. Anyone have any strong feeling one way or the other?
I think it's fine the way it is. I think city council knows that most of the subcommittees are set for six months. And so if they had a question about it being 2-year, the ones that are currently on the council who were there then would remember that it had been voted upon.
Okay, then I'm in the weeds. Thank you.
If there are no other questions or objections, can we approve this as our report to send to the commission as a whole? Can I have a motion to that effect?
Yes.
Jack,
Move.
is this going to be presented? Is this what you plan to present at the work retreat on May 8th?
I believe you told me yes, it will.
Okay.
That there's a short period for that.
Great.
And yeah.
Okay.
So we have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is made and seconded. No further discussion, I believe, is necessary. All in favor of approving this as our report to the commission, say aye or wave your hand.
Aye.
Blink.
Aye.
Something. Okay, that was easy. Moving right along. Okay, we are ready for Sergeant McIntyre and her report. This was pure luck. I applied for a ride along with a sergeant, Drew Sergeant McIntyre, and it turned out that she told me about this conference. Well, golly. So I said, would you please come to our meeting and tell us about it? So here we are.
So Jack,
I looked at the list and it was fascinating.
Let me tell you something. I got to sit on the promotions panel for folks promoting from patrol officers to sergeant. And
Oh.
Annie Mack came in with a binder with tabs that she had written out notes to every single possible question we could possibly throw at her. She was so incredibly prepared. She actually intimidated the heck out of me. And after she left the room, I remember turning and asking the rest of my co-panelists, do all of them come with a binder? And they're like, some of them do, but not usually like she did.
Well,
So that girl does her homework and she is super prepared.
Well, with
Yeah.
that introduction, don't blow it.
all right. No,
Right?
that's
No
all right.
pressure.
I appreciate it, Ms. Hawkins. So it was a fantastic conference. Like I kind of said in the beginning, you know, I do think Oregon is leading, and I do think our agency is leading with our peer support and response team. For some of you I haven't met, I have been with the agency for 15 years. I have seen this evolve, and it has been fantastic to see that I do think we learn our lessons when we hit them when it comes to officer wellness. And we play that out very well. So some of the things that we already do that this conference talked about was the peer support response team, in which you have a supervisor reach out to that supervisor and assign and involved officers to kind of a peer support during a critical incident. Some of the ones they talked about are infant fatalities, pretty horrific scenes, even if it doesn't result in deaths, such as crashes, where sometimes officers see things that the brain isn't really built to see. So they did talk about peer support quite a bit and how that should be activated and the confidentiality that goes with that. So if you feel like I'm kind of missing a chunk, understand we have a pretty dialed in peer support response team in the critical incident response ways. As a newer supervisor, I do feel like that's a very easy button to, there's a number, you call the on-call supervisor. And from what I hear from my officers or officers on the watch, they do get a quick response from that team, and don't feel pushed into getting support, and that they get to kind of lead whether they want to take that time off. So they talked about how officers are offered you know, a 72-hour window of time off. They find like on average officers kind of go for that 36 hours, you know, and take the rest of the day and maybe a day or two following. So that was one of the bigger portions. The next things, a few that I found interesting was field training officer burnout. We have that a lot in our agency right now because we have so many new officers, and we were hiring at an incredible rate. So one of the dynamics they talk to in that way is how to support those frontline leaders and to see them as frontline leaders. We often talk in our organizational structure of like officer, a little bit of a little stair step to detectives as experts, and then sergeant, lieutenant. And sometimes we do skip over those field training officers, and just taking into account that field training officers are going to push themselves into more things in order to get their officers exposure. So being aware that their burnout in 3 months might be a little bit higher than that of what an average officer is going to in those same 3 months for purposes of exposure and training. So while we offer incentive for 10% pay to our field training officers, are there other opportunities that we should be providing them as well for their overall wellness? Obviously, the quick one is always to go to higher accrual of vacation after a training period, or also, you know, just sergeants being more of aware of making sure they're getting their breaks, making sure they're getting food, and kind of the diet things as just an immediate supervisor. The other one was the rethinking of the night shift. They gave some very good pointers on kind of like 5 things that you can do. You know, they talk about your immediate ones in terms of diet, but also just the communication of officers speaking to their family, really explain to their family what that means. That oftentimes the focus is getting these younger officers who are typically on night shift through it, right? Just to survive that lower seniority time. And they're trying to get off probation. So they're really just performance based. So how much are we actually paying attention to the younger officers' family members instead of just trying to get them to survive their field training and their probationary time period, and equipping those officers maybe in a pre-academy with that conversation to their spouse of, hey, this is what it's going to look like when I come home at 8 a.m. I might be eating while you're trying to get the kids out the door, and just creating a peer support network for the spouses early in field training, so that we can retain employees instead of losing family officers with families because they can't make that big flip from nights and days. And they did talk about that a lot. It came up in this way, that divorce in an officer's life is one of a more critical incident. And then obviously the next is a death of a family member, but obviously parental, it's covered federally, they get the time off, but making sure that we are providing support when there's a break in the home. So trying to keep the divorce rate down obviously has higher performance for your officers. And one thing they talk about is night shift, providing those communication skills to those younger officers who might also be early in marriage. If you're hiring your 21 to 25-year-old cop on average. The other one I did attend was from the Portland Police. They have created. They attend the iftar dinner with obviously the Indian subsection of their community, and what they have found is that the Muslim community more understands where they're. Thank you, Jack. Where they has a better understanding when they do have an officer involved shooting. They have found that it is preventative for them to have uprisings, even if it's a day or two of riots, right? That can cost their city hundreds of thousands of dollars. It can also just tire out their officers, as unfortunately Portland had to learn a lot more in 2020. So they talked about that when they made these little subgroups, and the Muslim one is the best one they could have for a framework because they have this iftar dinner. It allowed them, if they did have an officer involved shooting, to have already a framework in place. It actually sit on their investigations division side and was pushed out through their gang task force, but the detectives and whoever in their Sunshine Division, I don't know if you guys have heard of their Sunshine Division, they do more of the community service outreach, kind of our community engagement team section, that those detectives reach out to the community leaders and they just have more proactive contacts and sit down, have dinners with them, or engage in a larger organized where they have more officers and more of command attend. And then that way there's a positive engagement. And so when if negative does occur, there's more of a bridge of communication. So that was something that actually our community leaned on. Last year we had a student, a University of Oregon student in the Congolese community from Portland. And tragically, it was determined fell out of a window on our campus. We responded. We did everything that we were supposed to do, and this has already been looked at. And what was challenging, though, is that there wasn't anything for us. There wasn't a homicide. There wasn't a murder. There wasn't anything suspicious for us. So we did our normal protocol and response. And then the next morning, obviously he's young. I believe he was 19. The family in Portland was notified, and they have a huge refugee community. And then our command for most of Saturday and Sunday was trying to prevent, because as like 1 came down, 20 came down, and 200 came down. And actually a Portland police detective from their investigations division came down and worked with our agency, our violent crimes unit, to communicate with those community members down here. So I know that sounds very pigeonholed, but in terms of officer wellness, they just talked about making sure that these ties exist allows for less overtime and burnout that agencies have seen in the past 5 years that have caused to either walking away from the job or just negative impacts overall for officer health. And that was a more unique one. I did sit in that one, and the questions afterwards, there was a lot more questions just because a lot of other agencies didn't have a quite as robust program for that. Like I said, I did sit on the peer support ones. The things I did share or found to be common are what we have in place. I do think that's a pretty dialed in policy. And the thing that I think is starting to come from it is the temporary duties assignment. I know, Jack, you'd spoken to me a little bit about what we can do for interventions if we find, if a supervisor maybe notices that someone's on edge, or, you know, their um, use of forces are being repetitive or more frequent than their norm. I'm going to put that in quotes. But if we, what can we do that doesn't necessarily require a, hey, you're benched, we don't think you're fit, or a full psychological evaluation? So they talked about this temporary duty assignment. It was a little bit challenging because it was a Tennessee agency that actually did have a psychologist in place, but he was very assured to say that he was not intervening upon it in a formal way. So basically it was a pull aside to the officer to offer them like, hey, would you like to do a 6-month detail? Would this be more helpful? Usually it was tied to something like a divorce, sometimes a newer child in the home that maybe was having some learning disabilities, or the family was having to adjust dramatically. And then a few were after officer-involved shootings or significant critical incidents. But it is a temporary duty assignment, and in that situation, or if they felt like there was a suicide threat, it was a voluntary give up of gun. And he said that they absolutely did not take the gun, but that there was a conversation if they were worried about someone's mental health to that extent. And then that after the temporary duty assignment, they would go through some questions. But again, none of it was done in a formal way. Their HR status didn't change. Their check at every 2 weeks didn't change. And there was nothing that would compromise this officer's ability to come back to duty. But there were still controllers in place, basically through the integrity. The lieutenant, it was a lieutenant and this mental health professional. So it was not at the sergeant rank. It did sit up at a little bit higher command, facilitated this process. And it was that psychologist and the lieutenant, the officer, and then wherever they were detailed into would kind of just know, oh, this is a temporary duty. And the first line sergeant would know it was a temporary duty, but the confidentiality basically sat at lieutenant up. And obviously for us, that would go to captain, DC, and chief, but that it was not something that was pushed out or well known. I can see some pros and cons there. It was actually pretty well attended. So it was, they did give some information to reach out in terms of once that person was done with the 6 months, if they went to a private person to get medically cleared, or because they did the voluntary, then they also just get, when they ask for it back, there's a trust there in place that their box is checked, that they understand that they're coming back fully capable of doing their work. So that was a very interesting one to me. I do think that was kind of one of the ones you were asking about, Mr. Rady. For temporary duty, if we're seeing that someone is maybe escalating, but not at the point of being removed. Yeah.
There was one more thing that was there, if I could interrupt for a second.
Totally.
In Portland, they have a lot of policy about not just putting people on a temporary duty assignment, but of giving people administrative time off for situations other than officer-involved shootings, and evaluating their people on a number of different criteria to think this guy or this gal could really benefit by some time off, and with a procedure for how this is determined and how it's done. Did you get any sense of that when you were at the conference?
No, they did not. Portland didn't offer that one. I didn't see anything like this. This was the only temporary duty one that I saw. And their mission, when they did kind of introduce it, was for people to be able to stay active in the role. So I didn't attend anyone that removed them completely. I think because for the most part, some of that is covered in our benefits. But yeah, this was one that was trying to keep them kind of as whole as possible. So it was more of like just a step or two back from having to use force while they mentally got back together. The other one that I did attend that I thought was notable well, there were two, was head impacts and concussions. I do think sometimes after our uses of force or injuries, like we get doctor's clearance, but concussion protocols, even in sports, I do think are pretty intense. And I think making sure that our first line supervisors are more aware of what those indicators can be after concussions, that doesn't necessarily compromise the officer's medical confidentiality, but the fact is a concussion can really change your brain or make you look very different or respond very different in a very fast way. So I do think concussion protocols are something that would make sense for police. And I'm not sure how much we really look at that. I know that we always ask, just like if they tear their ACL, like, are you good to go? Are you ready to come back? But also just kind of that baseline monitoring that their temperament can be pretty altered with a concussion. I'm not even going up to like TBI, but even just a good knock on the head can have some impacts. So I thought that was interesting just to kind of look, can we put them to a modified work schedule? Because keeping them, if they have a concussion and keeping them on graveyard sleep deprivation can look so much the same. So removing one, kind of like you do an elimination diet, putting them into a normed for a normal person, and then being able to get that baseline. And then once we can tell that they're good, then putting them back into that swing or night shift if that's what's required. So just a monitoring that makes sense for police work, I think, is something that would be helpful. And then financial resiliency, they just talked about that in terms of being another kind of third tier critical incident that can come up, is that the stress for law enforcement. And I know sometimes it's not talked about, sometimes we can have blankets and blankets of overtime sheets to sign up for, and then other times, it's getting cut back and in budgetary issues and just the stress of officers. That's not really unique to our job. I think that's something that can pop up for any type of work, but they did talk about it being a critical incident that sometimes they do make adaptations for, and just making sure that that platform is available if, say, their partner has a job loss, or if the overtime cuts back. Are we making sure we're paying attention to how stress is manifesting, or if there's, they were expecting one kid and then they have triplets, that's going to have an impact. So those were the two major ones. Was there any questions?
You told me you were going to visit the dog room.
They didn't. What's so ironic is they didn't have the dog room at the wellness one. They had it. So they had it at the women's law enforcement one in
Got ripped
California.
off.
I was so excited to go. I was like, I'm gonna go to the golden retriever room and hang out, because that seems like that also qualifies. When I was at the women's one, I was like, okay, I need to go to my leadership seminars, and so kind of felt bad hanging out there too long. And so I was like, well, the wellness one, that like qualifies as part of the program. And they're like, oh, we don't have one for the wellness conference. I was like, I feel like we would have it for the wellness conference. And so
Too bad.
they didn't have, and they didn't even have they had the dogs walking around. So there was probably 14 or 15 of them. So they're pretty cool. But they didn't even have a section like specific to like, how do you acquire a therapy dog? Cause I would have gone. So, but it was a great conference.
Excellent. Excellent.
Sergeant-
Commissioner Hawkins.
Sergeant McIntyre, did they cover the effects of what happens if a police commissioner shoots a trainer in the hand by any chance?
Oh,
So during the defensive tactics scenario part of the Citizens
Oh.
Police Academy, Commissioner Folks got off a really good shot and got Pesky in the hand.
nice.
I'm so proud of her.
Good job.
It's
Yeah.
come to this.
They say it's good for you guys to understand us, so that's how you understand, right?
Center body mass. Are
There was
there any questions for Sergeant McIntyre?
I just want to first say thank you, Sergeant McIntyre. That was phenomenal. Thank you for sharing. And there's things that I didn't even think of that you all have to consider. I did have a question, and did they have anything? There was an officer I did a ride along with, and they mentioned they carry Narcan with them, but that if there's that potential exposure that officers, sergeants deal with all the time, was there any discussion or I know there's only so many hours, minutes in a day to attend things,
Mhm.
but did they have anything around exposure to substances or things like that? Um, I don't know if that.
No, it makes total sense. So I'll speak to two things. The first one is they actually did have a very good substance abuse one that regarding, you know, officers if they are struggling with that. Sergeant Maynard attended that. That was in conflict, I think, with my temporary duties one of the ones that I had picked out that was asked about. And he said it's very similar to the system we have in place here. But in terms of the Narcan, I do know our policies. If you're handling that, you should have a second officer with you, and then we have a code 3 cover response if that happens. But and then we also have very good equipment at our evidence control unit. I'm not sure if they showed you guys that. So let me say back in the day, but about 10 years ago, if you like took methamphetamine off of somebody, we had these little plastic things that you could put it into the, like in the field, you would do your field test, and it would be a literal field test. And then you would put the plastic on top and you'd take your pen and you'd smash it and shake it. And if it turned purple, it was positive for methamphetamine. We don't do that anymore. Our training is to seize the item. You look at it. If it's white crystalline substance, based on training experience, you believe it's methamphetamine, like that suits for probable cause. And then same if you have foil with a black substance, suits for heroin. It may have fentanyl in it. You don't necessarily declare that for your arrest. So then you go back to evidence. You take it out of the plastic baggie. You put on your gloves, and then there's a hood, kind of like you see in a lab, with a plastic cage around it that's separate from even the packaging room. You go in there and you have your Narcan on you. Typically officers, like when I have seen it, they make sure they're not alone. They try their best not to be alone. And when they're doing that testing, but it is removed. There's a shield in place. The air sucks obviously all the scent up, and then they do the testing there. And then we have actually a really cool drug mobile device that sits. Our street crimes team kind of owns the functionality and the training on it. And you take a photo of the test, and it changes a little color. And so we're handling much less, and we're not handling just on the side of the road, which we did used to do. So that has changed. So those policies were tightened up. I believe when we started to have a real fentanyl problem in 21, the Oregon State Police actually was like, we will not field test. The only people that are going to test are the lab. And other agencies were kind of like, we'll go to that extreme for a short period of time, but the reality is we need to be able to. And so I think this came out, and Sergeant Macaulay might know a little bit better because he was on the street at the time, I think in 22, 23, then we went back to field testing, but in a much more controlled space. So.
Thank you for sharing all that. And it sounds like, again, maybe Eugene proper is ahead of the game when they're doing these types of things. So that's amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Were there any printed materials available at the conference that would be of use for us to see?
There were some they gave them within the app, but I couldn't download them. I could only read them. So it's something that I could try to like record, and scroll and then send, but it wasn't anything that was
Only if
readily
it's real useful.
Yeah.
And don't go to any great trouble just to.
Yeah. A lot of it was PowerPoints and slides. And then they just kind of spoke to it. So.
Any further questions? Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate your time. If you write up anything for the department about the conference, we'd love to see it.
Okay.
And thank you.
Well, thank you. And thanks for the opportunity to talk. And I just will say, because I'm not sure how much, we do go to a lot of conferences, and some of them are great. Some of them you kind of walk away being like, I could have done without that. And I just want to say that this was one. So if it is something you guys ever have a vote in or can encourage, this was a quality conference.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right.
Thank you.
We will move on then to Sergeant Macaulay, who I have not yet had the pleasure of meeting, but look forward to.
First question, Sergeant Macaulay, how's your shoulder?
It is much better. Thank you so much. And thank you, commissioners, for having me be a part of this. mental health throughout my career has been something specific to law enforcement that I really hold dearly. So the fact that the commission thought it important enough to create a subcommittee, I think is really awesome. We're really fortunate in the city to have really good support. I think sometimes our frontline officers can feel like that's not the case, but I feel like this subcommittee is a great expression of that.
We're trying. And I think we hope to get through. And when I came on the committee, I was somewhat startled to discover that while Eugene is in practice doing many things about officer mental health and general health and wellness, there was no policy. And I thought it was time we had one. Sergeant Jordan has done an excellent job working up the first 2/3 of it, and I understand you were to work with us to finish it. And the fact that you at the same time are one of the two people who run mental health and wellness programs in the department couldn't be better.
Yeah, it worked out great. I'm happy to help as much as I can. What a great segue. I couldn't agree with you more. And as I've worked with Sergeant Jordan on this, one thing that has kind of come to the forefront of my mind is we have multiple programs and wellness type things that are happening within the department that don't live under any specific policy. And as I was working with Sergeant Jordan on this, I'm like, wow, this really points to how much we're really doing for officers, which to kind of introduce myself, I'm Sean McCauley. I've only met Commissioner Hawkins. It's great to meet you, Commissioner Folks, and Commissioner Rady. I apologize if I butchered your name.
That's right.
I think that having an overarching policy, and I think I would be speaking to your words, Commissioner Rady, it's going to live on. So I started my career at the Douglas County Sheriff's Office. I spent under 7 years there. And I've been with EPD for 5 years. And I can just say from my personal experience in the wellness space as it pertains to law enforcement, EPD is far and above what most other agencies are. Probably, I would say also Albany PD, Salem PD, and then kind of at the top would be Portland as well. So I think we're doing things the right way. One thing that I'm super excited about in working with this, do you have copies of the draft policy with you by chance? So as we're working through this, I don't know if you can see some of my edits. I've added a couple more things that I've been working really diligently on over the past few weeks since I've been tied to the desk. One of those being acute stress adaptive protocol, and another that shows crossed out, I don't know why, cranial electrotherapy devices. And these are both at the forefront of wellness, especially as it pertains to first responders. We're fortunate here through Emily McCauley's work to be connected with Dr. Stephanie Kahn, who runs first responder psychology out of the Portland area. Is a former law enforcement officer, dispatcher, and now is I think she's a PhD. I don't licensed clinical social worker, maybe. I don't quote me on that, but she is so culturally aware. And the fact that we've brought her in not only for suicide awareness for everyone in the department, but then suicide intervention specifically for our peer support resiliency team. There's just all these things, all this moving stuff that really needs to live within a policy. Yeah, so I'm excited. I'm really excited about those things. I have draft policies created for acute stress adaptive protocol, or ASAP as we call it. And I have a draft policy written for the cranial electrotherapy device, also known as Alpha Stim, which is the company, or CES, because I'm not going to keep saying cranial electrotherapy device. There's a lot of nuances to the CES program I've found, and that's taken the majority of my time, trying to contact a local, culturally aware, qualified mental health professional who can facilitate that program, because that is considered a medical device. But yeah, I'm learning so much in this position. So anything that I can do to further policy 1021 as it pertains to all of its other policies it points to, I'm more than willing and ready.
Is this
Commissioner Folks.
Sergeant Macaulay?
Yes,
Thank you, sir.
you can call me Sean. You can call me Sean.
Thank you, Sean. So the CES, is that synonymous with EMDR? That type of, is that the machine you would use for EMDR?
No, CES is, or cranial electrotherapy devices is a part of wellness. Essentially, the Alpha Stim device uses proprietary electrical waves that are you put on ear clips, and this device puts electrical waves through those ear clips. And what many studies, it's been around for many, many years and is used widely. It's supposed to help with depression, insomnia, pain. And what's great about it is it's using low-level electricity. It's not addictive. It's not a medication or something to that effect. There's little to no drawback. I mean, some people experience some dizziness, so you shouldn't operate a motor vehicle for a couple hours afterwards, but people who are pregnant shouldn't use it. If you have a pacemaker, those are really, in my research, the top 3 things that would preclude anyone from using it. But otherwise, the upside is phenomenal. I'm working to obtain funding. I have pre-approval to have funding to get these devices. The real crux with the CES is it is a medical device, and there are departments within the state who are utilizing it for officer wellness. So I kind of need to work through risk and all that red tape to make sure that we're doing things appropriately. One, in my world in peer support, confidentiality is everything. So that's very akin to HIPAA and keeping people's privacy rights maintained. So again, I'm working with a local QMHP who is a understudy, or was an understudy of Dr. Khan. So she's very well read into this, and she's super excited and has helped the Corvallis Fire Department implement their program. So that's in the wings. That will be added, or is added to the draft under the law enforcement mental health and wellness policy. So that's something that you'll see towards the end of getting through the draft, getting to a final policy written. So, and to answer your question, ASAP is EMDR based. So eye movement yeah, okay, I'm not going to butcher that word, but EMDR, ASAP is an EMDR based therapy. And what's phenomenal about it is it's a screening tool and a therapeutic treatment for first responders. And we have individuals on our team who are currently trained. They were trained by Dr. Stephanie Kahn. We have a list of them. We went through a training recently as a peer support team. And again, the upsides to this are phenomenal. The delivery of this is, I don't have to talk. Let's say I'm receiving this from a trained peer support member. I can do it in a one-on-one setting. I can do it at the police department. I could do it at my house. I could do it in a group setting with, let's say, 100 different officers who respond to a major critical incident. We don't talk during it. It's a process where you're taken through this EMDR-based process, and you might be dealing with something in your personal life. You're going through a divorce, you have financial fallout. You're dealing with the issue that is most at hand for you, quietly, confidentially, and you're going through this very, very therapeutic process by people who you know that you work with, your peers. So I'm really excited about it. I feel like that procedure that I have written up is really close to being done. But again, that requires a qualified mental health professional, just kind of as an advisor, to make sure that our trained members are up to date on common practices and training, and that they're facilitating it correctly. Because with any of these new things that we do, I don't want to put us in a position where we don't check those boxes, or we haven't made sure that red tape is taken care of and then it goes away, because there's such a great advantage to everyone in the department.
Thank you so much, Sean. I appreciate you explaining all of that, and it really does help tie things together. And so within that policy, are you also going to address ongoing like trainings or updated trainings for individuals who will be assisting and walking folks through that process?
Yeah. So great question. That policy specifically has selection and a training component. So under selection, to be an ASAP or to deliver ASAP to a department member, it doesn't have to be sworn. You can be anyone within the department. You have to first be on the peer support resiliency team. So there's kind of a vetting process and an application process that goes along with that to make sure that you're an individual who anyone in the department would trust to come to with a personal issue or a work issue. Secondly, to be on the peer support team, you have to attend 2 trainings assisting group crisis and individual crisis. So you already have that baseline of training. And then what we've found is we can't get people to the class fast enough. I think we already have, don't quote me, 6 trained members who have gone through the ASAP training course. And they are, under this policy, considered trained, or the definition is a trained PSRT member. And if another PSRT member is interested in doing that, they would come to a supervisor, either Emily or myself, and then in conjunction with current training policies and procedures and working with command and scheduling and everything, union contracts, everything that goes into that, we would send them to an approved course. And right now that approved course is conducted by Dr. Stephanie Kahn, who I mentioned earlier. So ongoing training, through my conversations with our trained members, what was explained to me is that Dr. Kahn would be doing updated or updates or refresher courses by like web-based platforms. So video, email, things of that nature. And as this progresses, I'm sure that there'll be an actual in-person refresher course as well. So the policy reflects both of those, either web-based ongoing training or in-person training. So whatever we see in the future.
I love it. You guys have thought of everything. And I'm sure our chair has more questions, but thank you. Thank you very much, Shine. I appreciate it. This is really cool.
Yeah, not a problem.
Commissioner Hawkins, you have anything?
I'm so excited by this. I love seeing the leadership at EPD doing so much. And I would love to say that we would take credit for it and it was all our idea, but a lot of it the chief was already putting into motion before we came on board. And we're just in the fortunate position of being able to wholeheartedly support the efforts. I have a question about the policy 1021.4 for wellness program, saying that it consists of the following sub-programs, activities, and/or resources. One of them is the Comfort Canine program. Is that actually currently ongoing?
No, so again, as Sergeant Jordan has so eloquently told me on several occasions, we need to write this policy for the future. So my hope is that with all the support we have, not only from the community, from members of this commission, the police commission as a whole, and our command staff, I'm kind of putting rocks in that box, hoping that it's going to pay off down the road. There's currently some issues as far as determining through union contract how that selection process would go, how we would purchase a dog, how that dog would be maintained, which there's a lot of room for discussion there. But I kind of wanted to put that in there as a placeholder because everyone loves dogs. And I can't think of a single briefing that I haven't had interrupted by a patrol canine or a drug canine who walks in and I lose the floor and everyone wants to pet this dog. So I can only imagine the benefit to the department if we had a trained wellness canine or a comfort canine as I've come to know them coming in. So to answer your question, I have some examples of what those policies look like for other agencies. I'm currently trying to craft a procedure or a policy around that, but I don't have established funding. I still need to have those conversations with senior staff and those kind of things. So that's kind of a placeholder.
So since this requires allocation of non-existent resources, does it put EPD at risk by writing it into policy if EPD is unable to follow through with it? Because I don't want EPD starting off violating policy at the very beginning.
Yeah, no, great point. And that is something that can easily be redlined. As I was going through this, trying to just expand upon what Allison has already, or Sergeant Jordan has already done, I started adding it in there, and then I'm like, oh, ASAP. And as that started to come to fruition and started looking really good, I'm like, oh, let's plug that in there too, because really what this policy is is a long-term placeholder pointing to the existing programs that we already have and want to implement. And I know, at least I think I can speak for Emily and the peer support team when I say the Comfort Canine program has been on our list for quite some time. But to answer your question directly, if I don't have these conversations by the time this policy needs to get put into place, it'll go away.
Okay,
And then we can revisit it down the road.
okay.
You might look at Bend. They have like pages and pages of policy on their comfort dog program. It was truly
Okay,
amazing. It went as far as when the dog retires, who is it going to retire with?
Yeah,
And who gets designated to clean up after the dog or take it out for a walk?
yeah.
Rookie, there's a mess down the hall. That there was plenty of language there that would be useful, I think. And I don't really see that there's going to be any real trouble, theoretical trouble maybe, but real trouble in saying, when we get a dog, this is how we're going to run the program.
Yeah, and that's
this is
yep.
how we'll do it, not that we must do it. But we're all in favor of it, so it'll happen whenever it can happen.
Yeah.
I don't think that's going to cause problems for the department.
So
No, I don't think so
my
either.
concern with that would be if there's a new employee who's reading the policies or the manual, and at some point they leave EPD with an extra grind and they say, I was promised a comfort canine, because it's written right there in the manual.
Yeah. Yeah, you make a valid point. And, these are the kinds of things that Allison always reins me in on. And she's like, hey, awesome thinking. I love the energy, but we have to think about these downstream effects. So yeah, I find it hard not to agree with you, but also, to Jack's point, I'm sorry, our first name's acceptable. I'm sorry, I don't want to be
Please.
disrespectful. To Jack's point, I don't see anything other than a handful of conversations that need to take place and funding that needs to be allocated to make this a reality. That's easy for me to say that here, but I think at least I think the reasonable steps to take into account what you're saying, Jensina, would be take it out of the black and white. I'm still going to create it on the side and have it reviewed. And at the time that we're ready to hit the switch and go for it, then it's just, okay, let's put this into place. It already has a spot allocated within their overarching law enforcement mental health and wellness policy, and we're off and running. So yeah, some things to think about there.
Okay, it might be. No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, it's kind of sad though, because that's probably the one that we could count on unanimous backing from the commission as far as something to mandate for EPD.
Oh yeah,
100%.
oh absolutely. And if there's any hesitation, just have the dog walk through the room and everything.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. I'm surprised that the concern about expense, because I besides the kibble, it's not clear to me what would be the expensive item.
Yeah. And this is something that, so I've been fortunate to attend the Northwest Peer Conference the last 2 years, and they always have, I forget her name, but she is a volunteer firefighter for Subcommittee Fire, and she has 2 golden retrievers, beautiful dogs that she brings in, and they sit on a stage of hundreds of people and murmuring in the room, and they just sit there like happier than any dog I've ever seen in my life. And she has multiple resources. I have her contact information somewhere in a conference packet. That's kind of next steps that I would need to do to really understand expense. So I'm not trying to divert from this, but in kind of me getting into this process of policy and procedure and downstream effects and allocating funding, contracts and things of that nature, like with the CES program, I didn't understand that there would be more than purchasing the devices themselves. I didn't at the beginning understand that there was a contract that would need to be written up and that there would also be an ongoing expenditure for the qualified mental health professional. And I guess I'm novice in this, so I guess maybe that was, bad on me, but I I don't foresee allocating the funding initially to purchase the dog or the CES devices. We have a ton of support there. And we always have the police, the Eugene Police Foundation, which is more than willing and has helped me and the peer support team on multiple occasions, who would step in gladly to provide funding. I guess maybe the concern would be ongoing expenditures, which is kind of out of my purview. Yeah, that would be the only thing that I would think.
Okay, so what I see where we're at this point, I would love to get together with you, Sergeant, if you have time sometime.
Yeah,
There's one question that I would really, if you could possibly dig around and see what would be helpful to me in this regard, is all the policies of the department that provide for officer time off
mhm,
for any reason that could be related to officer mental health and wellness.
yeah,
Because so that I have a clearer picture, because we want two parts of this 1021 to be further developed. One regarding officer time off, administrative leave for other than officer involved shooting incidents.
yeah,
And the other is the question of the department engaging a qualified mental health professional as a department employee, which I understand is in process and for which there is no policy written. So
yeah,
something would need to be put together. My understanding is the policies regarding each of the items listed in 1021.1 or in 1021.4 specifically, is that each one would have a description of how they are implemented, we have the policy procedure already, for example, for peer support. As an extend, and that should, I think, move into policy. From what I've seen of other departments' policy on this question, they go through each one of these programs that they have going and explain how you get into it, how many people can use it, whose permission is required, how often it can be used, how you report, what kind of log is kept on use, blah, 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 blah.
yeah.
Do you see doing that?
Well, let me answer what I think you're asking, and you correct
Okay.
me if I'm not understanding correctly. So, initially, when I set out on this journey of expanding this the policy 1021, I said, why are we listing each thing here when we could just do 1020.1.1 would be peer support and resiliency, and Sergeant Jordan had a really good takeaway from that, and I feel like, knowing myself and knowing recruit officers, when we do policy review, you take in such a large amount of information that I wonder how you could summarize it in a way that encompasses everything that you want to cover without breaking it out into its own procedure. And I've looked at some examples of how different agencies do it, to what you're saying, where it's all under one thing, and I found it kind of clunky. Some of it was written better than others. Some things were incorporated in other pieces and pointed to other things. Whereas I feel like with this, maybe there's additional procedures or other policies that we can incorporate. Maybe we can clean that up a bit to exactly what we're pointing to. But then when you break it out into the specific procedure, I feel like it's a bit cleaner, and you can summarize the information and put it in, what's the word I'm trying to use? You can put it in a fashion that's a little bit easier to digest than if it is this 40-page policy that points to all these different things. Am I answering your question?
I think so. Let me be sure I understand your answer.
Fair enough.
The notion would be we have the policy which lists each of these things, but how they're done is not included in the policy document so as to keep it to a reasonable size. They are to be found in the procedures. Is that correct? Do I have you right?
Yeah. At least the way that I understand it at this point is by having this overarching policy that clearly outlines our purpose and scope and our intention and what the department's going to do, that it backs up all these procedures that have the minutia of, like for ASAP, for example, how it's facilitated, how you're trained, how you get on the team, ongoing training, who's overseeing that specific program. Because for example, obviously the peer support and resiliency team, cranial electrotherapy devices, CEDs, acute stress adaptive protocol, and I don't think we have a policy for it, but suicide intervention, suicide training falls under the peer support program. But that's not even lined out in our procedure. So which we're updating that, so it will. But I feel like the policy pointing to that for specifics, but saying this is what the department feels, this is what the department will back, this is what is important to us. I think validates isn't the right word, but it validates the procedure.
No, because I think, from the point you made at the very beginning, my understanding from talking to a number of officers is a lot of the push on these programs has come since Chief Skinner came in. And we're all aware that Chief Skinner is not with us forever.
Yep.
That there are other possibilities that we will get in the future, and we do not know what their attitude toward these general kinds of programs and procedures are. And if we have it in policy, we have a stronger case for their continuance than if it's just, well, we do this stuff. It's written, some of it's written down somewhere, but it's all different places and there's no unifying policy. I think the unifying policy alone won't make anything happen, but it's a kind of a fulcrum you can put a lever on and push towards getting the right thing to happen. But if we don't have it, we could have unfortunate changes. So I'd like to have it in place.
I couldn't agree with you more. And the longer I delve into this and see how one policy affects another, one procedure points to another policy, I think that only proves your point to what you're saying. And you're 100% right. I've only been with EPD for 5 years, so my entire tenure here has been under Chief Skinner, who I can confidently say has been nothing but supportive of the wellness things that we're trying to do, as well as Deputy Chief Adams has, Captain Wright. I mean, all of senior staff have been, they want to lower as many barriers as possible to make this happen. Obviously, they're at the 10,000-foot level, and I'm down here at sea level with the frontline individuals. But I have felt nothing but support. And now with the wellness funds, where we're allocating those to specific wellness things, I'm super excited. Another thing before it squirrels out of my mind, I wanted to mention, I'm also managing, along with Emily, the creation of a wellness center within EPD headquarters. Have you heard about this at all? So what's phenomenal about this is Emily and I have been on this march to try and get peer support to not be like in a 1980s Foot Locker in the basement. Like we need a room, we need a place where our peer supporters can take someone privately that's not a report writing room where everyone's going to see you walk into, or they can quietly go somewhere that's private while they're at work. They can grab the peer support person that they choose and privately have a conversation in a quiet space that's away from everyone else. It's confidential. And also the big thing with the wellness centers, we don't want it to look like an office. We want it to look like someone's living room we're going to the extent of, color palettes that are calming, massage chairs, little games to play after a critical incident just to get your mind right, things that better lighting, different window coverings that can let in some light during the daytime and exclude other. So we're really diving in deep to this, and I've had nothing but thumbs up from senior staff. And we're under construction, I believe. I think we had a permit issue, but I think that's kind of the personification of what we're all trying to do here, right? Like we're creating a center for wellness for all employees who are employed by the department, not just first responders, but specific to the first responder problem that for so long has been ignored. I mean, I've only been in this job for going on 12 years, and I can remember when I started, you have a bad day, take a knee, drink water, come to work the next day, we don't talk about it. And I'm very blessed to be in a position where I can have a hand in changing that. Yeah, it's just so many great things that I just keep gushing about how awesome it is. But it truly is. I have personally, even before I was on the peer support team, when I was a brand new officer here and they didn't know me from anybody, I was offered assistance and support and for all sorts of different personal life things and making a career change and a move. And it just blew me away because here I was, this small fish in this much larger pond. And no one knows me very well, but they're still, without even a question, hey, take some time for yourself. It's on the city. Or, hey, have you heard of our peer support team? Or, hey, you want to go out to lunch? And it's just, I want to continue that culture change. And I think that's what we're doing.
Excellent. Excellent. We're out of time.
Oh, I'm sorry. I talk a lot. I apologize.
That's all right. There's a lot of it going around here. I have a reputation myself, which I have to maintain. So if there is nothing further, I will adjourn the meeting.
Awesome.
As it is that time. I will be in contact with you, Sergeant McCauley, through Holly, to set up a coffee or something, if that's okay.
Please do.
All right, that'd be good. And Commissioner Folks, you talked about being involved in such a thing. Are you still interested?
Coffee?
Depending on the schedule. Yeah.
Yeah, heck yeah.
Okay.
All right.
See what we can do. I know your schedule's a little harder than mine. I'm the retired old fart. So, all right. Unless someone has anything further to add, I will adjourn the meeting. Meeting
Awesome.
is adjourned. Thank you all for coming.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Subcommittee.
It was nice to meet you.
A pleasure.